Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Thursday, the 7th of October. I'm Derek Clark. I'm joined this morning by Jonny McFarlane in the midst of this international break. How are we doing, Jonny?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. Great to be on talking about Rangers. Obviously, not an awful lot of biting news to get our teeth into, but we'll try our best.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do that, remember, folks, if you're watching us on YouTube, just to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a video. You get a notification to your electronic device. And remember, we've got a fantastic offer on just now for the Rangers Review. Only £1 a month for the first 2 months to support top quality journalism covering the club you love. Now, as Jonny mentioned, we're scraping the barrel with regards to Rangers news, as of course we're into the international break. So we're putting the appeal out to you guys. Just send us any questions that you want answered and we'll answer them the best we can. It may not be about Rangers, it may be about absolutely anything that's that crosses your mind. We're that desperate for questions, Jonny. So we're appealing for the masses to get involved with the show this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Get in touch. Fire your questions our way. Obviously, we'd rather they weren't about your marital life or your issues with your neighbour or your dog and how best to deal with him. We'd much rather it was about football. But, if you've got any questions, fire in. We're here to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan Kelly gets in touch. Morning, guys. Morning, Alan. Let's touch on the one bit of Rangers news. More so yesterday, a post from Ryan Jack on his Instagram account, picture of his football boots and a little caption as well, which suggests that he's close to a return to first team action. Jonny, we sort of touched on this a little bit yesterday, but that would be fantastic news. It's the old cliche, it'll be like a new signing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ryan Jack coming back would be an absolutely huge thing for Rangers. He's been missed, especially in these kind of tough games that you get in Europe, both in the qualifying and in the Europa League. And I think, obviously, he will be missed in the big domestic games as well, because he gives you a grit and ability to get forward in that midfield position. He's very, very defensively disciplined. He covers James Tavernier. James Tavernier doesn't look like the same player, but he's not got Ryan Jack coming in there and covering him. And we know that makes a huge difference to the kind of freedom that he can have on the right-hand side. And I'm sure it would be the same with Nathan Paterson, because Ryan Jack is so defensively diligent. He allows you to push forward with the abandon. I don't think it's the same necessarily with the other players Rangers have got who can play in that right midfield role at the moment, or the right side of the three. Because a lot of those guys are, if you think about players like Bacuna, like Lundstrom, they're probably more used to playing in the centre of a three, and it's going to take them time to get used to playing on that right-hand side. So I think Ryan Jack coming back will be a huge boost to the squad, Derek, absolutely. And listen, not just for Rangers. I know we take the mickey a little bit about international break, but he's a huge, huge deal for Scotland too. And Scotland just, they're not the same without Ryan Jack. We saw that at the Euros. I think Scotland would have done a lot better against the Czech Republic and against certainly Croatia. They had a player like Ryan Jack who had some defensive discipline, who could use the ball well. So, yeah, he's big for club and country.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the questions getting fired in. Good morning to Niels, who's got in touch, and also to Davy Hines as well. Got a cracking question here, Jonny, and it's a report that came from 90minute.com yesterday. Nathan Paterson apparently attracting interest from Manchester United. We already know about the Everton interest, the two bids that were rejected before the transfer window closed. But this was an intriguing one. Manchester United, could you see Nathan Paterson in that side?
I don't doubt for a minute that Manchester United will have his name on a list because of his age, his physical profile, and what he's been producing at a high level for Rangers. He is that kind of talent that big clubs will be looking at him. Do I think that Manchester United would be firing on a bid at any time soon? I mean, you look at the quality that United have. I mean, they've got Wan-Bissaka at right back. I think he cost £55 million, Derek, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah, you're more in tune with English football than I am, but that's a lot of money, and while I'm sure they'll be looking for to the future, as always, a club like Manchester United, would Nathan Paterson really want to go and sit behind someone like Wan-Bissaka who's going to play the vast majority of the games? You know, I know he's doing that with James Tavernier, but there's a long-term plan, I think, for Paterson to come in. You go down to Manchester United, you could end up being the third choice if they sign another player. That would be a huge move for him. But in terms of the story itself and the kernel of Manchester United having him on a list, I don't doubt that for a second. And we know Everton are interested in having him on the list.
Yeah.
So, listen, I've said this before, Derek. I think Rangers are going to have to make a decision in January or in the summer about Nathan Paterson. Do they want him to be the long-term right back, or are they quite happy to leave James Tavernier in situ for 3 or 4 years in that position? Because I don't think James Tavernier looks like a guy who's going to diminish rapidly as a player. He's a physical specimen. He's used to playing 50, 60 games a season. He's very, very rarely injured. So I think Tavernier could sit there like that. So I think they're going to have to sell one of the two of them at some point. I think it's going to be very difficult to keep them both happy. And maybe, you know, if you're to get a £15 million offer from England, selling Nathan Paterson wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. As much as it pains me to lose such a talented generational talent, something's got to give, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Gary Gray's got in touch. He says, if a big bid comes in for Paterson, £10 million plus in January, would it be worth using the proceeds to refresh other areas of the squad? It's a good point there from Gary, really. And I think it's a point we touched on when Everton had those bids rejected. We're thinking to ourselves, if Paterson leaves, it doesn't necessarily weaken the first 11. And you bring in that money to refresh other areas of the pitch, so you can see the point with regards to that and the common sense if Paterson were to go. But I think, like you, Johnny, a decision is going to have to be made. But tell you what, if Manchester United comes in with a bid, he's off. There's no question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's probably true. It would certainly be a head turner for a young player. But at the same time, Derek, for Scotland, is that a good move? You know, it depends on how much game time he's actually going to get. I know they have a history of playing young players down there at Man United, but it's still one that would just give me a wee bit pause. I mean, Everton, I can see that a little bit more clearly. I don't know about you, how you feel about it. Just if I was his agent, and there is a genuine offer from Man U, the temptation is to be like, well, it's Man U. Of course, you don't turn down Man U. But there has to be a plan. A tangible plan for him going from, you know, a young player into that first team, and it has to be reasonably quick. You know, he needs minutes. That's just how it is. It's a fact.
I think he gets more game time at Everton. I mean, Seamus Coleman there, he's better than him, and I just think he just suits the way that Rafa Benitez likes to play. And it'll be interesting to see if they come in with an improved offer in the January transfer window. So I think offers are going to come Rangers' way for sure. There's no doubt about it. And before we crack on with more footballing questions, Thomas McDougall gets in touch. Thinking you have a takeaway tonight, guys, since the Gers are not playing. Any ideas?
Well,
Johnny?
Thomas will have to tell me what part of the city that he's talking about here, because I've got a lot of very, very good takeaway recommendations. I mean, I'm over on the southwest of the southeast of the city. Sorry. Rotherglen area, there's a fabulous pizza place called Padano's that I recommend. So, but if there's other parts of the city, you know, I'm a guy who likes my food, as you can probably tell. So fire them in, and I'll be happy to throw them back at you.
Pizza's always a good choice. Big good morning to Andrew Nixon getting in touch. We've got an interesting question here from Ross Campbell. Do you think Rangers will be looking at a new centre-half as early as January with Goldson's contract and Balogun not the youngest and in the last year of his contract? That's an interesting one from Ross, Johnny, because we've talked at length about Goldson and his contract, but you seem to forget that it's Balogun's final year as well. Should they be looking for a new centre-half, do you reckon?
Well, remember they've got Nikola Katic, who's out on loan. So, I mean, we've discussed that in a bit of detail in this video in terms of, does Nikola Katic fit the long-term vision that Rangers have from playing out from the back. He's a very good defender, really good in the air. And that'll be up to the management team to whether or not he's improved sufficiently in that regard, or whether or not they feel they can get away with his more limited qualities in terms of bringing the ball out. So they have got 5 top quality centre halves. So if you lose Goldson, then actually it's not that big a deal. I think Balogun will be easy to deal with, Derek. I don't think he'll be looking for the earth or trying to be difficult. I think he likes it at Rangers. He's done podcasts where he's talked about his time at the club so far and how much he's enjoying it. And I think he likes working under the Gerrard, Beale, McAllister managerial team. So I wouldn't be worried about Balogun. Goldson, I'm increasingly thinking that he looks like he's decided that he's wanting to move on. But listen, I was starting to wonder that about Glenn Kamara, and he signed a new deal. So I think you just got to cross your fingers and hope that Goldson hangs about. It's really disappointing. I think it would be really disappointing for Rangers to lose him on a free, given his value. They signed him for £3 million. I don't think there's any doubt that a year ago he'd have been worth 8 or 9. This summer he'd have been worth maybe 6 or 7. So to lose him for nothing, it's a lot of money to lose out the door. But ultimately, he signed a 4-year contract. He's been a brilliant player for Rangers. There's no doubt about that. He'll go down as a legend of 55. His legend will even be further increased if he goes on to win trophies this season. So there's a lot of issues at play with Goldson. I think he's a guy who lost a large proportion of his career due to injury and illness, and maybe he just thinks at 29, I've got to get back to England and have a stab at that Premier League. They all want to play in the Premier League now. Listen, if we were players, Derek, we'd probably want to play in the Premier League at some point in our career too. You can be the biggest Rangers fan in the world, and ultimately, at the end of the day, when it comes down to your career, you're thinking of the bigger picture, you're thinking of the financial picture, and going down there and testing yourself against the absolute best in the world. I think it's quite an important thing for a lot of players at some point. And although Connor Goldson's had a taste of it, he wasn't really a key part of Brighton's squad at that point. So maybe that's what he's thinking. But it could surprise us all and come up with a new deal at some point. It just seems like it would have happened by now if it was going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. A good question here. A couple of similar points. McGinley getting in touch. What about the possibility of a Morelos call up to Colombia if their striker been injured and then he'd miss the Hearts and Europa League clash? And it's similarly, someone else mentioned, I think, Neil McLeod as well. I think we touched on this a little bit yesterday. I think time has sort of ran out. They've got a game tomorrow night, as far as I'm aware, Colombia. So you'd think if they were calling them up, they wanted to get jetted out there ASAP. So the longer it goes on, Johnny, you think he's staying in Scotland?
Yeah, and that's really good because Morelos is one of these players that can go on streaks, and of course he scored in the previous game against Hibs with a good header, great movement. There's a good piece on the website by Josh Abari about exactly how he made the space for himself. And listen, once Morelos is in the mood, once Morelos is in form, you know that he's a guy that you need to play, because when he's at it, there's nobody better. He's the best striker in the league when he's at it. So you've got to think that it's a massively important thing that he comes in and stays in the team. So it can only be a good thing that he's not going to be heading to Colombia anytime soon.
Yeah, Bob White's recommended a takeaway, although he is in Abu Dhabi. He's a Chinese. You can never go wrong with a Chinese, really. It's a good shout there from Bob. He also says it as well that the biggest reason to stay at Rangers for next season is Champions League qualification. That may be the reason Gerrard stays on for also. There's a couple of other interesting points here as well. One that we did a big piece on recently on the website, rangersreview.co.uk, from Stuart Keane. Do you think Rangers should look at Benny of Hearts in a future transfer? He's certainly one that's been on the radar, of ourselves, looking at. He's a decent player, isn't he, Johnny?
Yeah, no, he is. And again, Joshua has written a piece on that scouting is it Bamangini?
Yeah,
Bamangini,
I think.
And he looks like a really, really impressive player. When I was discussing when I was discussing him with Josh hadn't seen all that much of him, but I'd been impressed with what the little snippets that I've seen. Obviously, I'm not watching Hearts every week, but by the time Josh had went away and spent time looking at him on Y-Scout, talking to people in the game who've seen him, he was basically of the opinion that he's a guy that Rangers should really be looking closely at. He's got an incredible ability to turn over the ball. He's very, very good in terms of winning the ball in situations where you don't think he's going to win it. And defensive discipline and mobility, really, really good. The question is, I suppose, is whether he can adapt the other side of his game. You're not really seeing a lot of that at Hearts because he's got quite a specific role in the team, and it's very defensively orientated. So could he be more of a hybrid at Rangers if Rangers were to make an offer? But he certainly looks like a really, really impressive talent, and I think you've got to pay credit to Hearts and their director of football, Joe Savage, for picking up a diamond in the rough from England that I don't think many people were even aware of. Yeah. Certainly up here, it's looking like it's going to make them a good few bob.
Yeah, it could be another Glenn Kamara in a fair. I think they'll need to pay a bit more money for him, but it's interesting. He started at Everton. I remember he joined Wigan. He never played much when he went there. I think Wigan had just entered financial trouble when he went there, and then Derby, of course, have got their own financial troubles to seek. So he's not really had regular game time, but he's getting that at Tynecastle and showing what he can do. And he's certainly a player that Rangers, you're sure, would be keeping an eye on. Before we end up, another point here, I can see a fairly significant turnover of players next summer if we win the SPL and have access, Champions League access. That recruitment process becomes easier. I can see a fair amount of change over the next two windows. I think I had done a piece on this recently, Johnny, with regards to contract situations and Rangers getting players tied up to avoid a sort of transformational change in one of the windows. It's something they'll need to be keeping an eye on, don't they?
I think it's inevitable, actually, Derek. I think the commenter is absolutely spot on. I think there's going to be a big turnover in the summer, not least because I think football will have recovered a bit more from COVID, which I think has been a major sticking point for the transfer window that we've just had. Will probably still be something of a sticking point in January, but I suspect the gears might be moving a little bit in terms of some clubs getting some more money in, having had crowds back and things like that. We see that I was reading a piece this morning about Barcelona and the absolute financial catastrophe that's going on there. The effect of COVID is still there and for some huge clubs. But I do think a lot of others will be starting to get their house a bit more in order. And by the summer, you've got to hope that will mean the sort of mid-level transfer market of 5 to 20 million will be open once again for business. And that'll be only a good thing for Rangers, because by the end of the season, unfortunately, if new deals haven't been agreed with people like Yanis Hadji, like Joe Aribo, like Ryan Kent, and there's others as well, then you're going into a sort of final year situation, and we know you don't get bang for your buck at the same level in your final year that you do if they've got 2 years or especially 3 years to go in their contract.
Yeah.
But I think with a year to go, are you really going to want to let another raft of players walk out the door, a bit like what's happened with Connor Goldson, for next to nothing or on a free, when they've given so much and they've developed so much under Rangers and the management teams coaching? It's absolutely huge. I think that this transfer system that Rangers have in place, this player trading model, begins to kick in, and we can see some players moving through it. I think that's absolutely key. And someone else said earlier about obviously rejuvenating the squad. That's what's needed, actually. It's as painful as it'll be for Rangers fans to watch a player like Ryan Kent or Alfredo Morelos leave. That's what is needed to move to the next generation that's going to come through and become Rangers stars. You need that money to then go and invest, not just in the club and in the financial health of the club, but to go out and actually pay some transfer fees for players.
Yeah, that's how the football world goes round, that's for sure. Okay, that'll do us there. Thanks to everyone getting in touch this morning. Remember to hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube so you'll never miss a video. And remember, we've got that fantastic offer on just now for the Rangers Review. Just £1 a month for the first 2 months to support top quality journalism covering the club you love. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, enjoy the rest